You've had an opportunity also to read the bios of our speakers. I am going to ask each of them to really ground us in who they are, in the work that they do, the work that they are leading, and its intersection on this topic of arts and culture and leaning into being an aspiring global city.
As well, I agree that the city is in this constant identity crisis. When we, as a person, we are going through an identity crisis, we interrogate ourselves. Okay, who am I? And we work hard to try to define who we are.
I'm not opposed to artists leaving Pittsburgh because I think when you leave, you learn. And when you come back, you teach and you expose people that are following you to more.
We are in many ways way better than we were when I left here the first time. We still have a long way to go, but I'm here to not be a person on the sidelines making comments, but to be in the work.
I'm Janis Burley, and currently I'm the president of the August Wilson African American Cultural Center. I've been around Pittsburgh a long time, born and raised here, but I've been working in this space as an arts administrator since 2002. When I first came to that type of work here in Pittsburgh, I was working for the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. And that was when there weren't a lot of restaurants downtown. People went downtown just to see a show in the theater and then would go home. And most of the people that you would see going downtown to see a show did not look like us. It was a very white, older audience. So I was brought in to change that, to bring some diversity to the arts downtown. It was a struggle because it wasn't necessarily welcomed right away by everyone. There were some that really wanted it, but it wasn't as if the entire downtown community was all about that. So I grew up in a very arts rich environment. My father loves music. My mother loves visual arts. She's a quilter. She's also a school teacher. My father, I remember hearing jazz and R&B and soul and music from very, very early on. There's a picture of me and I have like a onesie, pajamas. I might have been like 2 and I'm playing with some 45. So I was trying to play music even that early on. I started the Pittsburgh International Jazz Festival in 2011. Started and I started the gallery crawl in 2004. And the gallery crawl, that was a vehicle to diversify the arts downtown, if only for one night. And so we would take over vacant storefronts. I would invite our Latin American Cultural Union at University of Pittsburgh to come down and program space. Or I would invite a group that was called the Bridge Spotters, which was a group of spoken word artists and visual artists to come down and take over a space, and eventually invited them to inhabit a gallery, like program a gallery long term. So those kinds of things, that's what I was doing in the from 2002 to 2017. Then I took over the August Wilson African American Cultural Center, and our mission is to be a home for storytelling and exchange of ideas rooted in African American art and culture, but also the African diaspora. So that means wherever people of African descent are have been transported around the world, which means it's wide open and exciting. So that we do a lot, we work with a lot of different organizations, and I'm happy to be here and happy to be doing that work.
Thank you, Janis. And Dr. Ariel Armony.
When we presented the book with the World Affairs Council, something happened that I did not expect. The idea was to present the book, and the book doesn't talk about Pittsburgh. And that generated a lot of conversation about Pittsburgh. Do these cases that we discuss here in any way apply to Pittsburgh? And we, you know, think about this book and think about Pittsburgh. And that triggered a very interesting conversation with Betty. And today we've had with the Global Fellows a whole day focused on that. That has been extremely interesting. So I'm very eager to see where this goes, and where this conversation goes because there are tons of very interesting possibilities, and I'm sure that we are going to touch on those. And I wanted to finish by saying, and we will be able to talk about that when we think about cities that are globalizing, yes, we think about very key aspects which have to do with the banking and finance centers, about tech, about the real estate market, about transportation, trade, but also arts and culture. It's absolutely crucial in this mix of key elements.
Excellent. I do want to go back to this playwright history. I had no idea. I've known you for years, but we'll move on. In your book, Ariel, let's stay with you. You speak to the distinct assets that exist between the arts and culture and the impact it has in shaping a city's brand. Can you walk us through some of these unique but also shared elements that you found when you were looking at Miami, Dubai, Singapore as the recognized emerging global cities?
So one very important thing is that culture, particularly the symbols in culture, play a central role in determining how a city is defined. This is really important. This symbolic culture is central because we live in a world of cities where cities are competing with each other. And this is absolutely central. Culture is absolutely central in terms of defining the identity of a city, the brand of a city. Um, Today we were talking a lot about Miami, for example. So Miami has become a very important financial and banking center. Brickell is second to Wall Street in terms of concentration of this type of industry. Miami has become a very important center for construction and real estate with a lot of investment from Latin America, but also from other parts of the world, Europe, and increasingly, for example, China. Miami is a transportation center, transportation hub, but also a very large trade center with Port Miami and really a lot of activity. In addition to that, what's very interesting, and we were learning a lot more today from Josette Espinosa Fuentes, who's the vice president of the Arch Center in Miami. Miami has been paying a lot of attention to the development of arts and culture. A big moment was when Miami brought Art Basel to the city. Today, we also met with the representatives from the Steelers, and I wanted to say that when it comes to money, and money many times is important, there are more private jets flying to Art Basel than to a Super Bowl. That tells you a lot about arts, cultures, and sports. And in addition to that, we have the Arts Center, the Paris Art Museum, ballet, opera, the New World Symphony, Wynwood, the whole corridor, the so-called cultural corridor. So you start seeing in that case how the other aspects of the city, the more traditional aspects that build that global dimension, are now intertwined with arts and culture, which of course is a very important engine in terms of economic development, but in addition to that, is central to shaping the brand of the city. I want to add another aspect. I don't want to talk too much about this. We have, a lot to discuss. But there is one thing that I wanted to mention, which is that, yes, the book looks at Miami, Dubai, and Singapore. And one may think, well, this, we are talking about big stuff. This is huge investment. This, is that relevant to us? In what ways this can inform a strategy? But at the same time, in the book, we also talk about other cities that we call global hopefuls. Cities are not still there, but have many components that are globalized. One of those cities that we discuss is Lagos in Nigeria. There's a very interesting dimension there, which is Nollywood. Nollywood is, in terms of the number of films, that in terms of the number of movies, one of the largest film industries in the world. It is one of the largest employers in Nigeria. And it's an excellent example of grassroots entrepreneurship. This started in a very simple way where people started to simply film local theater productions and distributing that in the VHS, format. And it started to grow, it started to get more investment. And as I said, now it's a very large industry. It is not only important in terms of its economic impact, but it's projecting the image, the identity, not only of Lagos and Nigeria, but of the African continent globally with local stories. So, what an interesting example to be thinking about the role of arts and culture, urban centers, and globalization. I'll leave it there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Janice, you started to touch on this, but your work is entrenched in Pittsburgh's deep roots in jazz and also critical to elevating the imprint that the great August Wilson left on the world. These are two incredible assets with a long history right here in the Hill District. Can you take a few minutes to ground us in some Pittsburgh history, our reality, and our potential when it comes to these assets?
Sure. As Betty said, we are obviously right here in the Hill District. So much art, so much culture and tradition is rooted right here. Jazz musicians that were born and raised right in this neighborhood left Pittsburgh, started in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was like a proving ground. You had to be able to hang with some of these great musicians that are still living in Pittsburgh on stage. And then you would go out and around the world and take our culture here in Pittsburgh, but also African American culture around the world. August Wilson grew up just a few blocks from here. He became a member of a collective called the Center Avenue Poets, which was a group of poets, activists. They created spoken word plays and performed them here in Pittsburgh, dispersed and went different places. Obviously, August left, but he took that experience and all that he learned from the people that were born here and were living here and projected that out to the world on stage, on Broadway, around the globe. August Wilson plays are performed literally around the globe. I was approached by a group, an Italian group of musicians and actors that want to perform the play Jitney in Italian. Well, they did it in Italy and they want to bring it to Pittsburgh. So we're talking about how to make that happen and have it tour the United States. So it's the impact and the culture that was created here in Pittsburgh has definitely been taken around the world and influenced artists and creatives globally. I believe that as it relates to musicians that are here now, think about Hugo Cruz. And I remember when he arrived in Pittsburgh. And I think I got a message from another great jazz musician named James Johnson III, who is connected to an organization called the Afro American Music Institute in Homewood, which is another proving ground for musicians. And he said, "You've got to hear this guy." So I booked him. I didn't know what to expect. And of course, he was amazing, just the way he was a few minutes ago. But I think that as far as making Pittsburgh a global city and projecting images, being a welcoming city is so important. Hugo, I'm sure, has talked to other musicians in Cuba and around the world that he is connected to and told them how he's been embraced here. And I think the act of embracing and welcoming artists and musicians from other places is key to becoming considered a global city where people have an opportunity to thrive and to create in their own authentic way, right? And it educates all of us. It educates the artists that are from Pittsburgh, expands their repertoire. And so I think it's very important to open doors and welcome artists of different backgrounds coming from different places to lend to that global feel that we want for Pittsburgh.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah. So Kendra, you just over a decade ago uprooted your life from Brooklyn, came back to Pittsburgh. You walk this line between your, again, deep roots as a musical artist, as well as the space that you're now part of the day job, innovation economy. Hearing Janis and Ariel and what they're sharing and your own lived experience, I'm curious if you can speak to what are the hope and the challenges you see that we're facing for creatives, for artists, for innovators, and in general, what's alive for you? Great question, Mary.
That's a very big question. But can I just step back for a second and just say that the big questions that you're talking about in your book, I looked at it at a very micro level in the Hill District. My dissertation research was done in the Hill District. It was about the work that particularly Black women cultural workers in this community do to make it a social space and make it a place, market as a place where people live. And the same when you talk about Miami and the way arts plays, and I believe that happens on a community level. And there's a book by a professor from NYU, I think she's still at NYU, Arlene Devia, that talks about how cultural work marks the space, marks the place. And so a lot of times, and I find this is kind of answering your question, I find that a lot of time cultural workers, whether they be artists, whether they be scholars and intellectuals, whether they be, they could be coffee shop owners, people that are kind of just creating the cultural motif of a community, are brought in as window dressing for placemaking and things like that, without realizing that we actually are the people who convene and make a space, make a place a place. The banks don't make it a place. The buildings don't make it a place. The people do. And when all is gone, and if everything is gone away, what's going to mark this community, what's going to mark this city, are not the buildings that are gone, are the banks that can tumble, but their cultural artifacts, or the memories of those things. And so I believe one of the biggest problems facing artists, not just in Pittsburgh, but just globally, is that people look at us as a nice to have window dressing, when in fact, not to be super, super dramatic, but we make life worth living. And I don't mean just professional artists. I mean everybody. Everybody has a hymn that they sing, or a poem that they recite, or a TV show that they watch, and all of that participation and not just creating art, but connecting with art and culture is what makes us human beings and people. And again, I also study anthropology, so this is also a whole nother part of my brain and life. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And it bothers me as a person who actually was an organizer in the Hill District for artists. And to this day, I'm not even in that role anymore, but some people only know my name, so they'll email me anyway, and I'll just still coordinate it. And they're like, oh, we're about to do the same. Can you have a couple of artists look at it and tell us if they like it? And I'm like, when does it due? On Friday. Like, what? And so that's to me the biggest problem facing artists and culture workers, in that people forget that they've got it reversed. And in fact, instead of inviting us to the table at the last minute, that we should be the ones convening the table. I really believe that. I believe that I'm successful in my job at Duolingos because I see freedom dreams. I see things at that table that people at that table can't imagine, because they're being pragmatic and they're doing what they're supposed to do. They have MBAs. And my job is to see things that are not there and be able to translate them in ways that make sense for them, connect to the bottom line, connect to the mission of the organization, but also will bring life to the community and will also benefit the community and things like that. So I hope that
It does.
someone here.
That was beautiful. Yeah. So one thing that I know has come up in different conversations that I've been a part of is how artists, certainly it's looking back, but even present day artists in Pittsburgh have to leave Pittsburgh
Yes.
to be recognized. They're not recognized, even if they're world renowned. August Wilson. So, Ariel, I wanted to throw this back to you because you and I have definitely talked about this. How August Wilson, again, legendary genius, and when you put him alongside the notoriety of an Andy Warhol, much of the accolades go to Warhol. But tell us what your thoughts are there.
And Warhol left Pittsburgh to become Warhol. And so, a couple of things I want to say. I didn't say earlier that what my job is. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Global Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. So my role is to lead the strategy globally for the university and its engagement. And that takes me around the world. One thing that we did at Pitt is that when I arrived, the study of the African continent was considered a second-rate thing. And we created a center for African studies and nurture that. And we have in our field the most prestigious competition among centers that are located in the top universities in the United States is to get from the Department of Education the designation of National Research Center, and we got it for the African Studies Center. And as part of that, I've been many times to the continent, and I remember going to Dakar in Senegal and meeting colleagues and saying, yeah, well, we are from Pittsburgh. Oh, August Wilson. So it was not the Steelers, it was August Wilson. And we met several experts on August Wilson and tremendous interest. And we, as part of that, we invited them. We had here, panels. We developed projects, and so that speaks about, that we need to recognize who we are and the type of things that are important to us. Regarding Warhol, our conversation is that, well, how do we think about the city and the people who define the city? And we were discussing earlier that I think it's great to have a Warhol museum, but is that the right play, of the name? For example, one thing that was done years ago by the Warhol Museum was to organize a Warhol exhibit in Seoul in South Korea. And I think that was brilliant because what they were doing was to use the brand Warhol to promote the city of Pittsburgh. Yes, that worked internationally, but the question is whether that's a way in which it works here in the way that we want, to work. And so earlier today, somebody said that the Pittsburgh brand may be still defined by the people who left the city. And I thought that was an interesting observation. Tough. It's a tough statement, but I think it's something to think about. And the additional thing that I wanted to mention is that one aspect that I know we all agree that it's extremely important is immigration, and it's how cities work hard to include the immigrants. And in our study, for example, another city that we looked at is Sao Paulo. And Sao Paulo, which has a very rich cultural life, put very, very serious and systematic efforts to make the city more inclusive for immigrants in many ways, not only because of ethical reasons, but also because there was a clear intention to make that city more global, more interesting, and richer in terms of everything that immigrants are bringing. So that component is another one that is very, very important. And I think that the changes that we are seeing in Pittsburgh, one of them is the incredible growth of the Latinx population here in the city really bring new opportunities that I hope that the city takes advantage of them.
Thank you.
Kendra, did you want to get in?
That's okay. I won't mess with the program.
Okay.
So we have so much here. So tied to the brand, it's Pittsburgh to me, I see as, and I can say this because I'm a daughter of Pittsburgh, a city in a constant identity crisis between being the blue collar, steel town, Berg, the Yinzer energy, which I grew up in. I was in elementary school in Pittsburgh public schools when the steel mills were closing. So I can claim that genealogy. And the eds and meds and the new. And the problem I have is that people have been convinced that we are taking their stuff and don't think that those two things can happen at the same time. So in fact, a lot of is happening where we are defining the city by people who left, but what we're not doing is recognizing people who are still here, who are silent and angry, and we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about poverty and displacement and dispossession beyond the African American story. There are white folks here who have been forgotten, and they're upset about it, and that's being leveraged purposefully. And we can't afford that. We're in a swing area. We can't afford to not say, hey, y'all, this is all of us. Like, we all need this. The melting pot doesn't get bad when you drop in a little indigenous blood, a little melanated blood. That in fact, the melting pot with all of us is better for all of us. If all of us thrive, it's better for all of us, you too. So there's a scarcity mindset that is not needed because there's so much abundance. I love this city. I can critique it. Like James Baldwin said, I can critique it because I love it. There's so much abundance in arts and culture and resources. There's resources that we have here that we don't have even in larger cities. But if we believe that when we see other people show up as their authentic self and do what they do, that we have to lose, when we define ourselves by only certain kinds of art, and it's not even the art that makes us distinctive, right? Like, it's great, it's world class, but it's not what makes us special. That's where we are. So I believe our brand is always in transition, always in kind of like identity crisis, but hopeful. And I'm very hopeful that we can like turn that corner and recognize the melting pot, even when you throw in a little indigenous blood, when you throw in a little melanated blood, when you bring in the immigrant folks, when you understand that the Hill District and Homewood and Hazelwood is not just extractive, but actually grounds the city in so much that we can, I mean, the sky's the limit. That's why I'm still here. Because I could easily go back to New York. But I'm not going to do that. You gotta do that.
Well, I agree that the city is in this constant identity crisis. When we, as a person, we are going through an identity crisis, we interrogate ourselves, okay, who am I? And we work hard to try to define who we are. And I think that that's very, very important. There is another aspect of Pittsburgh that continues to amaze me, but not in a positive way, is that I keep hearing, well, Pittsburgh is a hidden gem, is the best kept secret, and we have been talking about that for a long time at the university. Don't tell me again that it's the best kept secret, because that is not good. That's not a good idea. You don't want to be a hidden gem. You want to be out there telling people all the great things that you do, and also the problems that you have and the limitations and the weaknesses. But let's go and tell our story. And I think that that is very, very important. And I wanted to add that for somebody like me, who comes to the city, there are many things that are still difficult. You have been talking, about the great things that happen in terms of arts and culture in different venues. But let's take a traditional one, the Pittsburgh Symphony. Okay. I go to the symphony with Mirna, with my wife, and every time we go, we think, aren't there other conductors to invite? Are there other um musicians? Are there other composers? Is the world just white and one-sided and one-dimensional? I want to be critical here because that's what we think, and we said this is a great. We know that it's a top orchestra. It's a great symphony, but we are in the 21st century. We are in a country that has changed dramatically. When you look around, you don't see diversity, but there is a reason why you don't see diversity. And so it's also about thinking about those spaces in the city that really need to change. And I don't know if these conversations are going on or not, but they must be there. We need to have those conversations because that speaks about the type of city. The other element, and I was saying earlier, is that one experience that personal that we had was that we moved here to Pittsburgh from Miami, and that Mirna, my wife, in all the places that we had lived, found a job within a couple of weeks, and here couldn't find a job. And eventually we started getting feedback of why she was not getting a job in the finance sector. And the response was, well, she has been to many different places because I see New England, I see Miami, I see Washington, D.C. Even she spent time in China. So we were like, but that's an asset. That's not a problem. And for us, it was a crude awakening that something like that we accepted as a given, that the fact that you have diverse experiences is actually makes you a very attractive candidate. It adds a lot to your talent. In many ways, here was seen as a problem. And so that's another aspect that I think it's really important to be honest about that and put that on the table and have these kinds of conversations because that mindset needs to change.
You're here. Thank you to our panelists. We're going to move into Q&A now. So if anyone has a question, go for it.
Thank y'all. Y'all like took everything out of my mouth. So as an artist, being from here, everything I'm fed to God, by the way. I'm from Mercer. I'm signed to Wiz Khalifa, so I do everything around the world, just in back in Paris performing. So as an artist from Pittsburgh, like I said, I just performed in Paris, and two major shows that I just had in Pittsburgh was canceled because of the demographic. And I'm on a national record label, and everybody, even city officials, is telling me to leave Pittsburgh to become great. I represent Charlotte's Web. Mike is my manager, and the struggle I'm going through right now is I want to stay here. I don't want to leave. I had opportunities to go live in LA. I can live in Atlanta. I can live in Miami. I can even live in England. But I'm from Pittsburgh. Everything about me is Pittsburgh. Everything about me is the Steelers. And as soon as I leave Pittsburgh, all people know about Pittsburgh is Perot's, Fernandez, and the Steelers. Like that. So what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do. Everything about me embraces Pittsburgh, and it's like, yeah, I'm putting on for the city, but the city's not putting on for any artists from here, from the rap standpoint. Like y'all was just asking about the brands, and I think, like you said, we have the best kept secret, which is terrible for it to be a secret, but our rap scene is probably the best music scene in America right now, and it will never get, like, it'll never get the recognition because the city doesn't back us. So constantly coming up, we don't have clubs to go perform. We can't perform for the world. We can't perform for the symphony because we're always looking at it's like, well, what are you bringing here? What is the trouble that you're coming with? And it's like, if I'm coming to you, that means I'm putting my name on it. So there's going to be no trouble because I have to put my name on it. So we don't have the opportunities to show Pittsburgh
Mhm.
how beautiful the music can be. Yes, it can be
Mhm.
encouraged by a lot of tragedy. It can be encouraged by a lot of the hardships we brought up on, but we can't show the beauty of it because we don't have the opportunity to do it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And you're not alone. A lot of the questions that we got in advance, the word investment is in it. So what investment can be made to preserve and promote culture? How can cities better invest in the sustainability and longevity of artists, support artists and creatives?
So
Who would like
just
to
before
take
I
this?
cut you off, 'cause
Yeah.
like you said, investment. So I'm pretty sure you know who Mac Miller is, who Jimmy Butler is. We lost a lot of our artists who could have made us a global city because they had to do some things they didn't really want to do to pursue music.
Sure.
So it's like we don't really have the resources that Brooklyn has, that Atlanta has. It's like you see Young Thug and grow up in Atlanta and then Zach Randolph or somebody from Atlanta Falcons, hey, let's take you out of here and
Mhm.
take you out of there. In Pittsburgh, it's like, all right, cool, you rap, we don't care.
Right.
Like they want country and rock here. They don't want culture here. They want culture, but not all culture. It's not acceptable.
Yeah. Who would like to answer? Robin?
I have lots of thoughts. I'm trying to be quiet. So I think it's not limited just to hip hop, but I think hip hop is the most egregious example. I think, you can look in photography, Latoya Ruth Frazier, right? You can look at jazz. My friend went to the Hollywood Bowl the other day and George Benson performed. And he talked about Pittsburgh as this place that he's kind of from, but like he don't really mess with it like that no more. Right? Because of this. And so now we have the most egregious example of hip hop where hip hop can be an outlet, hip hop can be an opportunity to give people something to do. Because honestly, the kids who would enjoy something like that don't have anything to do. This is an opportunity. Instead of like making sure all the checks and balances and all the things that are needed to make sure they can have a wonderful, safe concert, they rather just say, nope, we're not doing that. Meanwhile, everybody's listening to the music. Like the young people want to see you of all ages and all races and backgrounds want that music.
But the majority of the audiences at the hip hop concerts that do make it to Pittsburgh are white.
Yes.
But I don't think people that you're talking about know that. I don't think they realize that. I'll give you another example. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
But I started a little jazz series it was like on the plaza downtown. And this was 2003. And someone that I worked with at the former organization that I worked with, which was a predominantly white organization, they said, well, we don't really feel comfortable doing jazz concerts. We're not used to working with these audiences. The majority of the people that come out for jazz are white, or older white people.
So to add to y'all,
So they were shocked
yeah.
when the people tell like, oh, okay, which was very insulting. But
Even
yeah.
add to that, like I say, I'm national or on a global level. Like the best example of what I'm trying to say is Beyonce came and they canceled it to ticket sales, but Taylor Swift had the same ticket sales and she came 3 days after and they let it rap.
They sabotage Beyonce though.
So that's not so like what I'm saying is Pittsburgh, when it comes to hip hop or anything that has to do with hip hop, they don't give it a chance. Pittsburgh is we gonna go the day of city. We ain't gonna bad tickets. So it's like he take us with us to sell out immediately. He sold out the day of. Like SZA, it was about the SZA, Wiz Khalifa, me and Hazelwood.
Mhm.
It didn't sell out immediately. They canceled it, but it's like, bro, give it a chance.
So this goes to the point. Sorry, but Ariel, I want to bring you into the conversation because you had also spoken to the mindset, right? So what do we do when we don't have the resources or the support, the recognition? Like, what needs to change in the mindset? Is there anything you would want to add to that?
I think that there are probably lessons that we can draw from other places. Think about Wynwood in Miami. That was an area with warehouses. It was an area that, of course, didn't attract any kind of tourism, and that was all. And they started by bringing street artists, and they started to say, "Okay, here's a wall. Do whatever you want," and that started changing the place. Didn't need a lot of investment. It didn't need the famous artists. It was a very smart move in terms of recognizing local talent and saying, okay, Here's, in that case, it was a wall. Here, it could be, here's the Pittsburgh Symphony. Those kinds of actions can have tremendous impact. And then, of course, you have the story in Miami that is a whole new area, has grown tremendously. And then you start having, yes, the other side that, the real estate companies say, this is interesting. So you start having, again, the problem of gentrification, and this is pushing into Little Haiti. And so, well, we are always going to have that. But my point is that if we take that story, it's better to have that story, okay? Because you are creating opportunities, you are creating economic development. What Miami didn't do, and it's one of the problems of the city, is that it has not paid attention, and it doesn't pay attention to serious issues of inequality that are caused by this approach. Pittsburgh, and I want to end with this, one really good thing about Pittsburgh is that, forgive me for saying this, but Pittsburgh in general seems to me 20 years behind in many things. And I've been thinking, but there is a bright side to that you're building not what was 20 years ago relevant, you're building what today is relevant with the opportunity to look at all the mistakes that other cities made and try to address as many as you can. That's a great opportunity if we take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So that's my thinking.
Kendra. Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that real quick and get back to say that some of what you're talking about how they built up Wynwood area and all that stuff, like people did that here. But when you focus on place making and not place keeping, what happens is what you said is that you gentrify and then you move the artist out. Case in point, it comes up in every conversation. I work in East Liberty, I'm in Duolingo. Shadow Lounge was a place where the Mac Millers and the Wizzes come to perform. I had an album out back in the day in the early 2000s, and I came home, and the only place I would perform at here in Pittsburgh, besides everywhere else I performed, was at the Shadow Lounge. It wasn't a big fancy venue, but everybody who I wanted to be there was there, and it was awesome. And places like the Shadow Lounge are what made East Liberty cool and made people want to develop and make it fancy. And then what happened to it? It's gone. The Jamaican restaurant that was over there that made the place cool and great is gone. So that's one piece. And then the other point is similar to what you just said, is that it's actually part of the argument I make in my dissertation, is that we do have an opportunity to look at, to say that, development is inevitable, but we have to do things differently. We have to do it differently. And let's take the opportunity, because we are 20 years behind, to get ahead of the game and do things differently. The problem is we got to call a thing a thing. Pittsburgh is deeply rooted in structural and cultural racism. Everywhere is structurally racist, right? It's the fabric of our nation. But Pittsburgh is just blatant with it. Like, yeah, we don't want, for them to tell Janis they don't want a jazz show downtown, where like in every city, jazz is what attracts people to come downtown. People want to spend a lot of money and eat. If they're not going to listen to jazz, they're not going to listen to hip hop. Even though, like you said, he's big everywhere else. So we don't call a thing a thing, we can't address it. So we have to call a thing a thing. It's just actual cultural racism. And we've got to, and the reason why the schools are where they are right now, the reason why our young people are the way they are, is because they have suffered from it. I went to Pittsburgh Public Schools and we didn't have as big a budget, but we had all the access to everything. Peabody, I used to go there on the weekends and do Centers for the Musically Talented. I'd be there all day. I got to train the best opera singers, the best musicians. It was free. And now people I was in that program with just win Grammys. Monica Ellis from Imani Wins was in that program with me. PPS K-12 won a Grammy. We don't have that same story anymore because a lot has been stripped away because of just straight up racism. All right, I'm done.
Go right ahead. Yes.
I have read the people who in some of the entire medical organizations, that they're actually not trying to be right on the right direction. That when new leadership like Symphony, the new leadership of this medical leadership, all of these things, which are not criminal, I'm going to change it, and got to have it now, I think it'd be right. Where people, that and talking, and never, wow.
I think it's a great opportunity. You're absolutely right. The cultural leadership in Pittsburgh looks completely different from what it looked like even 5 years ago. And so I think that as you're saying, it might not be changing as fast. I think it's changing as fast as we're able to, because we can't just, barrel through and say, we're canceling that and that and that. And now we're doing all of this, and it's just too bad, because we also have sponsors. Well, not me, I don't have to worry about that kind of thing, but they have sponsors, they have board members that are anti hip hop, that are anti anything Black, okay? Or just anti. And you're talking about
That's so
the city. They've tried to make some changes, but there's pushback there. I'm a problem solver. That's how I approach it. When you tell me a problem, I don't have a whole lot to say to you, like the solutions. I'm thinking, and I'm looking at Kendra thinking, what could we do to solve that problem? And so that I want to talk to you afterwards about what we could possibly.
I'll actually have a call with y'all. I'm gonna do something with all this.
Okay, see, I don't know everything that's happening. But yeah, the leadership is very different. So I would predict in 5 years, the way things look now, they're going to look even more. I'll just say different from the way that they are right now. Shonda McDill at the Pittsburgh Public Theater has thrown everything up in the air, landed on the ground, and she's organizing it the way that she wants to see it.
Thank you for all the love and also all of those assets that you pulled into the conversation. And yes, that mostly brilliant sculptor and an artist, absolutely.
And world famous.
Yes.
I mean, people don't know
98
it, but
years old.
people around the world know. Yes.
98.
All right, let's close this out. Final thoughts. Ariel.
I can start.
You go.
So thank you so much for mentioning the African Heritage Room. The nationality rooms are within my responsibility, so that makes me very happy. I want to end on a positive note because yes, we have many challenges, but I was thinking about something that both of you said in terms of the big change in terms of leadership. And that is something that I've seen these years here in Pittsburgh. And I wanted to tell a very, very brief story, is that when we came to Pittsburgh, I attended a public meeting downtown organized by a very important organization here in the city, where they were talking about a big effort that they were sponsoring to bring immigrants, to bring new people to the city, and they were explaining that they were focusing on Puerto Rico because they said, well, so then we don't need to deal with visa issues, etc. We'll target Puerto Rico, and we'll bring talent from Puerto Rico. So this is what we are doing. Latinos like to dance and they like music. So the way that we are going to attract them is by organizing this music dance festival, because, these Latinos like that. Can you say anything more offensive, repulsive? For example, to me, a Latino, I said, where am I? I mean, are we, is this hell or? I don't think that we will hear that kind of statement or that kind of action plan now here in Pittsburgh. I think that cannot happen. And for me, that's huge. That's huge. And I know that I speak for many, many people who have made this city our home. Thank you.
Okay, last words. I think that there's a lot of work to do, but I think that there are a lot of people that are committed and talented and want to do the work. I'm not opposed to artists leaving Pittsburgh because I think when you leave, you learn. And when you come back, you teach and you expose people that are following you to more. So I'm not opposed to that. I think that people should get out, and I hope that they come back. So you performing in Paris, you learned something while you were there.
Right.
And when you come back, you're here now. The next time you perform, there might be something that you're not even aware that you picked up that you will share with your audience. So I think that the cultural landscape here in Pittsburgh is so rich. We're so fortunate. And we all just have to get out and support the artists. That means show up, means buy a ticket, you know. And then, as you said, Patrick, you know, putting pressure on the people that you vote for to also support in some way.
That is my story, and I left Pittsburgh to go to college in New York. I said, I am never coming back to this place. And did it not under duress. I was doing very well in New York, but because I came home and I started to see the change. And so we are in many ways way better than we were when I left here the first time. We still have a long way to go, but I'm here to not be a person on the sidelines making comments, but to be in the work. I feel like I've been doing that. I initially came back home to be a full-time artist because I'm like, oh, the rent is cheaper. I can just chill. I've done everything, but I've been organizing and serving on boards and working and getting jobs and messed around and got a PhD. Did not come home to do that. But so I'm a firm believer that we can get there. But I also like what you said, ma'am, about global citizenship. I always tell people that I am a proud Pittsburgher, but I'm a global citizen. And I think sometimes when we cling to our Pittsburgh pride, it's a good thing, but sometimes we do it in a way that can be not so welcoming, that can be very provincial in our thinking, thinking small. And I agree with Janis that sometimes it's good for us to get out and come back and recognize that there's more in the world, but also recognize what we have and recognize that we can stay in Pittsburgh or we can even come back, but being a global citizen is what it's about. And I think that's the work that you do. And actually, one of my favorite events every year is the World Affairs event. Actually, that's how Betty was able to convince me to join the board because I was like, that's my favorite party every year. If Pittsburgh can look like this, then this is the program I want to be down with. So thank you, Letty.
And I'll say that for me, as someone whose hometown is Miami, Florida, but Pittsburgh is my chosen home, y'all give me so much hope. So thank you. We are going to party again. October 4th is our soiree, our annual fundraiser. Please come out. Please go to the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council meeting in September 12th. Please check out the International Jazz Festival, September 20th.
20th, 21st, 22nd.
Excellent. And so much more going on. And we need to do the work together. So thank you for your attention and for being here. And
Can I plug one more thing?
go for it.
So we're in the DATS building.
Yes.
Dr. Aisha Morgan Lee has been on the board of International Blacks in Dance for, I think, quite a long time now. And through her hard work, she's actually bringing that festival to Pittsburgh in January. So when we're talking about Black culture, Black art, Black bodies in downtown Pittsburgh, there's going to be thousands during that festival in January. So shout out to Dr. Aisha Morgan Lee.
Dr. Aisha Morgan Lee. You're here. The DAT actually turns 20 years next year, and this is part of one of their kicking off their big celebration in January. So yes, please follow their good work and stick around, connect with one another, have some more delicious Brazilian bites by Kayla Nogueira. Have some more wine and check out our station so you can better connect to the history. Thank you.